This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. For Kia Hyundai, the best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department. Whether it's quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors. 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Very pleased, as always, in this limited window we have to have Adam Rittenberg with us from ESPN. Adam, welcome back. Great to have you with us. I hope you're doing well.
Doing well, Steve. Yeah, just making rounds to some of these ACC schools this week, but happy to be with you as always.
What are you picking up as you make the rounds of the ACC schools, and has that included North Carolina yet?
Yeah, I did stop by North Carolina the other day. Coach Belichick wasn't there, although I did meet briefly with his son, Brian, and some of the other assistant coaches. And certainly is a different feel, with him as the head coach there. And it's going to be a program that's going to be watched maybe unlike ever before. And, they haven't, done a lot of interviews and, really been out in the public very much. But they're certainly preparing as much as they can. They just picked up a transfer quarterback and Gio Lopez from South Alabama. I'm actually at Wake Forest today, and some of their coaches coached Gio last year, and he's certainly a promising talent for North Carolina. So definitely, much like with Colorado a few years ago and Deion Sanders, I think we're going to be reading a lot of Bill Belichick stories this year.
Oh, I think so too. And if he were there, I think his quote to you would have been, "Well, it's on to Duke." Anybody else that you picked up along the way where you walked out of there at least impressed by the general feel and culture of the place that you were at?
Really, all the other four places I've been to have been impressed. I went down to South Carolina yesterday and visited with Coach Beamer, and obviously they have it rolling there with Lenore Sellers coming back. But ACC-wise, I think Georgia Tech is really a team to watch. And, Brent Key has quietly done a really nice job there, especially winning big games. They beat Florida State. They beat Miami. They should have beaten Georgia in that wild game at the end of the season. And, they bring back their quarterback and they bring back their star running back. And they haven't lost, at least as we speak here today, a ton of players of value into the portal. And so I think that's a program, if you're looking for kind of a sleeper ACC team that could challenge, for maybe the ACC title if all things go well. If Haynes King can stay healthy, they really believe that they have an opportunity to do some big things there. And then I was at Duke the other day with Manny Diaz, and they made a splash in the portal, obviously, with Darian Mensah coming in from Tulane. And Manny told me it was really kind of symbolic. Obviously, they wanted him as a player, and he's a multi-year guy for them. But just to tell Duke people and the rest of the country that Duke is serious about football. I mean, you walk on that campus, and Cameron Indoor's right there, and the Duke Basketball Museum, but Duke football doesn't have nearly that history, yet they've had some success here lately, and they're trying to build on that with a player like Darian Mensah.
Is Manny in any way approaching it any different than he did at Miami? And did the Penn State experience give him some perspective on that?
Well, I think all your experiences help. And, it's obviously a very different program. He doesn't have the personal connection to Duke as he did at Miami, having grown up in that area with his family and everything. But, I think it's just a very different type of program. terms of the players that they recruit, and how they recruit, and their history and their expectations. But I think there's certainly a desire to win there, like he had at Miami. I think there's just it's a simplified environment, if that makes sense. Miami, I think, to their detriment here, especially over the last 20 years, I think that the environment around that program has contributed to them not being as successful as their potential is as a program. Whereas at Duke, he doesn't have to deal with some of those other things, those factors that I think hurt him and have hurt other coaches ultimately at Miami. And so I think his personality, how smart he is and how he thinks about football, and really the type of guy you sit with Manny, that he could have been successful in a number of different fields. I mean, I sit in front of football coaches. You've talked to a lot of them, and you kind of walk away from some of those meetings saying, God, thank God there's football, because this person probably couldn't have been successful in another line of work. Manny Diaz is not one of them. Whether Manny continued his career at ESPN, people forget he worked there, or he was in finance, or he was a doctor, a lawyer. He's the type of guy that he's just that smart. I think he would have been successful in no matter what he did.
Agreed across the board. South Carolina, 14th last year in the final college football playoff poll, and they created an argument despite 3 losses along the way. What did you take away from what's going on there and the excitement maybe even in Columbia that may not have been there 2-3 years ago?
Well, it was interesting talking with Shane Beamer. He pointed out that no one really thought they were going to be good going into last year, but they thought they would because of the number of players they had returning. Now they lose a number of really good players to the NFL. They're going to have, I think they had 13 players invited to the combine. They could have 8 or 9 draft picks, including obviously their safety going in the first round. And so it's largely a new team, either new transfers coming in or returning players that have been elevated to bigger roles, but they're also bringing back a star quarterback, which they didn't have. Right. There's a major question last year. Now Lenora Sellers, who I spoke to yesterday, is a Heisman Trophy candidate, and a guy who had that incredible performance against Clemson, and who everyone's going to be buzzing about as one of the best players in the country. Can they build around him now and fill some of those holes, especially on defense? I had a coordinator in the SEC tell me that South Carolina was one of the more impressive-looking defenses that he saw all season, and Ole Miss was right up there as well. But so there's certainly a higher expectation now, and they know that the next step for them is the college football playoff. There was a time not long ago that you could win 9 games, and your next step was winning 9 games again, probably, or maybe winning 10. But now, because the expanded playoff and the teams that have made it, it's really provided a level of hope for a program that, again, just doesn't have the history of Penn State or Alabama or Georgia or Texas or some of these other teams that are making the playoff. But South Carolina can look at that as a realistic goal now.
Ironically, before the show, Jack Ham called me. We were talking about a couple of things. And at one stage he said to me, after watching everything play out at Tennessee, are we surprised anymore about anything we see? And I said, not particularly. What was your take on that? And by the way, that doesn't mean this didn't happen maybe subtly a year ago at a couple of other places. But being a quarterback, this was more public. What was your thought on this one and how it played out with Nico?
Yeah, it's a great point, Steve, that, in talking to some folks the last couple of days, they said absolutely it's happened. Oftentimes it's been resolved, or it hasn't gotten out publicly the way that it did at Tennessee. And, I think what makes this unique is the player involved, the position he plays, the school, and then maybe more so than anything, the timing of when this happened, right at the end of spring practice, when a lot of teams have wrapped up their springs, and that he was on track to be the starter and to lead a team that had made the playoff last year, but, potentially back to the playoff or to win the SEC championship. And so I think I think it's an important moment. And coaches that I've talked to have mentioned that Tennessee's stance and saying, no, Nico, we're not going to pay you double because you're not worth that. And we've given you a really good deal, especially coming out of high school when you hadn't taken a single snap at the college level and barely took any meaningful snaps as a freshman before moving into the starting role. We're not going to double your salary. And if you want to walk, you can walk. And so coaches have said that that's an important moment, and it's obviously a situation that, at least as we sit here today, does not seem to be beneficial to the player, which is unfortunate. And the thing that really gets to me, Steve, is that it's just disruptive. It's disruptive for the Tennessee program. We know that.
Yep.
It's disruptive for whichever program he goes to next, UCLA. I just talked with Coach Foster last week. You know, he was very happy with Joey Aguilar and the offense and where they're headed. If he goes there, it's going to disrupt their program to a degree. Tennessee's going to have to add a starter caliber quarterback from outside the SEC, most likely. It's going to disrupt that team. Let's say he grabs someone from the Big 12 or the Big 10. Then that team has to go out in some cases. So when does it stop? And we're sitting here, and there's not much of an opportunity for these guys to prepare for the season in a formal setting until they get back together in late July, early August. I think that's really unfortunate. So, the big thing I've been talking about on this trip is how do you structure the sport better? Because the way it is right now, it just doesn't work for enough people that are obviously grinding and working every day.
And part of that's the 105, and we're still waiting for the House settlement to be approved by Judge Claudia Wilkin. Have you had an opportunity to talk to the coaches about the 105 and about the walk-ons and about the possibility of having to cut people?
Really, all of it. I think there, certainly is a expectation that this is going to happen relatively soon. But there, just talked with someone moments ago here at Wake Forest about how they didn't expect this to be finalized by early April, and that we would still be in the kind of waiting game stage. And so you have a lot of these schools that are pouring money into NIL to try to distribute it before this, the rev share goes into effect. And then, the 105 factor is big. I was talking to the director of a collective in the Big Ten the other day about transfer possibilities, and they were saying, well, no, we're not really focused on that. We need to get our roster down 10 to 15 spots to be able to meet the 105 threshold. So, Nico is certainly a story because it's the front end of the roster. It's starting quarterback of an SEC program. But then, as you point out, there's also conversations going on in the back end of a roster where guys are being told, hey, you don't have a spot here. You should probably move on. If you want to start or have any sort of meaningful role, this is time to get into the portal. And, we all remember a couple of years ago, that's what Deion Sanders in Colorado did, and we were all talking about that as the big story. Now, how they did it, could it have been handled better? Absolutely up for debate. But that process of cutting your roster down is absolutely occurring. Coaches I was talking to this week were meeting with me in between exit meetings with their athletes after spring. So all of that is happening right now.
I know you have to go, Adam. We appreciate the time you gave us today. Thanks so much, my friend. Appreciate you.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Have a great weekend.
Adam Rittenberg from ESPN. We'll come back with more in a moment. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.
If you're suffering from spring fever, Sunbury Motors Kia has the cure. The Spring Fever Reliever is a new Kia from Sunbury Motors Kia. They make it easy to choose because there's 120 brand new Kias available. And $750 owner loyalty is back on the hottest selling Kia models, including the Made in the USA 2025 Kia Sportages and Serenos. Drive home in a 2025 Kia Sportage EX all-wheel drive with leather for under $30,000. Or how about the third row 2025 Kia Sereno S all-wheel drive? Save thousands now as low as $35,034. more. And of course, every new Kia comes with a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. Stop in today and check out the full Kia lineup. And together, we can be alive in 2025 at Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummels Wharf.
Warranty is a limited powertrain warranty. For details, see retailer or go to kia.com.